adhikashtadinam, poor persons suffering more pains because of their poverty, poverty-stricken position. Vishtya, by force. Nigrihan, nigrinan, seizing. Niranugraha, asi, you have no mercy in your heart. Janashya, of the people in general. Gopta Ashmi, I am the protector, king. Vikatha manaha, bragging. Nashobhashi, you do not look very good. Vridha Shabhashu, in the society of learned persons. Dirishtaha, simply impudent. Srila Prabhupada's translation and purport. It is a fact, however, that these innocent people carrying your palanquin without payment are certainly suffering due to this injustice. Their condition is very lamentable because you have forcibly engaged them in carrying your palanquin. This proves that you are cruel and unkind. Yet due to false prestige, you were thinking that you were protecting the citizens. This is ludicrous. You were such a fool that you could not have been adored as a great man in an assembly of persons advanced in knowledge. So Prabhupada's purport. King Rahugana was proud of being king, and he felt that he had the right to control the citizens as he liked. But actually, he was engaging men in carrying his palanquin without payment, and therefore he was causing them trouble without reason. Nonetheless, the king was thinking that he was the proprietor of the citizens. Actually, the king should be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For this reason, he is called Naradevata, the Lord among human beings. However, when a king thinks that because he's the head of the state, he can utilize the citizens for his sense gratification, he's in error. Such an attitude is not appreciated by learned scholars. According to the Vedic principles, the king should be advised by learned sages, brahmanas, and scholars who advise him according to the injunctions given in the Dharma Sastra. The duty of the king is to follow these instructions. Learned circles do not appreciate the king's utilizing public endeavor for his own benefit. His duty is to give protection to the citizens instead. The king should not become such a rogue that he exploits the citizens for his own benefit. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that in Kali Yuga, the heads of government will be plunderers and thieves. These thieves and plunderers take the money and property of the public by force or convenience. Therefore, it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Rajanyer Nigrihirnai Dasha Dharmabhihi. As Kali Yuga advances, we can see that these characteristics are already visible. We can certainly imagine how deteriorated human civilization will be by the end of Kali Yuga. Indeed, there will no longer be a sane man capable of understanding God and our relationship with him. In other words, human beings will be just like animals. At that time, in order to reform human society, Lord Krishna will come in the form of Kalki avatar. His business will be to kill all the atheists, because ultimately the real protector is Vishnu or Krishna. The Lord incarnates and sets things in order when things are mismanaged by so-called kings and heads of government. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. Of course, this takes many years, but the principle is there. When the king or governmental head does not follow the proper principles, nature deals out the punishment in the form of war, famine, and so forth. Therefore, if the governmental head is not aware of life's goal, he should not take charge of ruling the people. Actually, the supreme proprietor of everything is Lord Vishnu. He is the maintainer of everyone. The king, the father, and the guardian are simply representatives of Lord Vishnu, empowered by him to look after the management and maintain things. It is therefore the duty of the head of state to maintain the general populace in such a way that people will ultimately know the goal of life. Unfortunately, the foolish governmental head and general populace do not know that the ultimate goal of life is to understand and approach Lord Vishnu. Without this knowledge, everyone is in ignorance, and all society is crowded with cheaters and cheated. Oh, the text again, it is a fact, however, that these innocent people carrying your palanquin without payment are certainly suffering due to this injustice. Their condition is very lamentable because you have forcibly engaged them in carrying your palanquin. This proves that you are cruel and unkind. Yet due to false prestige, you were thinking that you were protecting the citizens. This is ludicrous. You are such a fool that you could not have been adored as a great man in an assembly of persons advanced in knowledge. Om Agena Timirandasya Gana Gana Shalakaya Jakshu Anmalatam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stavitam Yena Bhutale. So I am Rupakadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Parakamala Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sagrajitam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadabhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Janamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Sundavadi Pashatya Deshatari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Shri Gaurava Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnaveभ्यो Namo Namaha. Haribol. So I just realized I didn't completely finish that prayer. I usually just say the first part of it, and so today I was saying the whole thing. So this text 7, it's a text that has meaning for everyone that lives in the world. It's such a beautiful text, as always. Srila Prabhupada, he is Srimad Bhagavatam. Just gives us knowledge to help us to become aware of the situations that we're facing, just living on this planet. So this conversation between Rahugana and Jad Bharat is a conversation that is meant for time eternal in one sense, because conditioned souls will always be coming back to the material world. So there's so many reflections in this text and so many realizations a person can have, so many lessons we can learn. Something that's important in this text that's consistent in what Srila Prabhupada is speaking about in relationship to Kali Yuga is this understanding of someone that's in leadership, playing that role. In this case, it's the king, Rahugana, and his role, of course, is to lead the citizens. He's a leader, and it's being pointed out here by Jad Bharat that he's not leading according to religious principles. Jad Bharat is leading according to fulfilling his own desires. So we all know this statement. I know Srila Prabhupada has spoken this statement at different times. However, I believe it's also spoken by some other philosophers. The statement says that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So Maharaj Rahugana, he had absolute power because he was the king. He's the ultimate in terms of the monarchical system. And in that system, he is supposed to lead by example. However, because he was such a powerful person, he was consumed with that power. That power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Srila Prabhupada wants us to understand this point, that leadership, especially in that time, in that age, although he's playing the role of the king, Maharaj Rahugana, he's a king, and of course the king is a part of the Kshatriya system. He's a part of the Varnashram system of the Varnashram order, which in that order, as a Kshatriya, he has certain privileges. However, a major part of the privilege of the king at that time was to lead the citizens with God, with Krishna, as the fountainhead of whatever the relationship may have been between king and citizens. The ultimate is for the citizens to understand God, and he wasn't doing that. He wasn't representing the Lord in that way. He wasn't representing Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, he makes a statement about the spiritual master, and he says that the spiritual master is the representative of God. And so this is how we, as aspiring devotees, understand the relationship between us and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the first understanding is that the spiritual master represents the Lord. And when we have this understanding, we will also receive this understanding from the spiritual master, in this case, Srila Prabhupada, who's taught us that similarly, just like the spiritual master is representing the Lord, he's not the Lord, he's not God, the spiritual master. Sometimes when someone is new and they start first reading our scriptures, they somehow get this conception that we're saying that the spiritual master is God. And I remember in the early days of nurturing devotees, some devotees would get really upset. Some persons, as they're aspiring to become devotees, they get upset because they're like thinking, why is it saying spiritual master is God? And Srila Prabhupada makes that very clear, that the spiritual master is not God. Actually, many people, many different, even in the early days of Krishna consciousness, there was that misconception that created many conflicts because of people thinking the spiritual master is God. No, the spiritual master is a representative of God. And therefore, the spiritual master is to be worshipped as good as God, as good as the way we would worship the Lord. We worship the spiritual master because he's representing the Lord. Similarly, the king is also a representative of God. So the king is to represent the Lord in terms of how, he teaches and how he lives, the way that he behaves. Everything is to be as a representative of God. These are the statements that's in the scriptures: the king, the spiritual master, because they're going to guide us. They're the persons that are representing God, representing Krishna, in terms of helping us to become aware of our relationship with the Lord. So because the king guide and the spiritual master guide, the Father will also guide, right? This is the mood in terms of understanding, if we try to understand the system that's set up in the material world, Vanashram, then the father plays a very important role because the father is also a teacher. And Prabhupada explains to us that one should not become a father, should not take on the responsibility if they cannot take care of their children, cannot take care of their siblings, if they cannot lead them on the path of understanding their relationship with the Lord. So then Srila Prabhupada, he asked this question, so what is guidance? And what does that mean to guide someone? And that guidance is how a person can become Krishna conscious and he goes on to say by education. So Krishna consciousness is education. Because why? Because most people are coming out of a conditioned consciousness in the material world. And then the last point Srila Prabhupada makes about this is this education is by culture. So what's guidance? Guidance from either the spiritual master, from the king, from the father, representatives of the Lord. This guidance is to help people to become Krishna conscious by education, by culture. Now, what are we seeing in this verse about culture? So, and what is the education? What is the lesson we're to glean from this verse? What are some of the reflections in this conversation between Maharaj Rahugana and Jai Bharat? Well, we can see that there's conflicting cultures, right? In this text. There's the culture of exploitation, and there's the culture of care and compassion. And they conflict because one culture is a culture of thinking I, me, mine, domination, and thinking that everything evolves around me, in the case of the king, and thinking that I own the citizens, I own them. Therefore, what I'm doing is right. It's proper. Of course, I'm the owner. They're my subjects. They're my subordinates. So it's quite acceptable that they carry my power. Why is there a challenge with that? Because in his consciousness, he's a king. He's aware. He's a king. He's aware that he has this authority position, and he's thinking that these persons belong to me. They're my subjects, and I can deal with them how I want to deal with them. This is the nature of exploitation. Exploitation tells us that everything is supposed to be according to my expectations. How I want, how my person. And so this king is teaching us this example. So we see this is a mentality since time immemorial. This is why Prabhupada mentions in the verse, Krishna descends, Krishna comes, Krishna advents for a couple of reasons. One, of course, is to please his devotees, because Krishna loves to be in association with his devotees. Also, there are only two pastimes that don't really have Krishna's pastime of adventing and having that association with Mother Yashoda. That's in terms of Goloka Vrindavan, that pastime is not available there. So he comes to engage in that pastime because that's his sporting activity. That's what he loves to do, is be with his devotees. And so he comes to Gokul Vrindavan and he engages in that pastime. So this understanding, of the Lord and learning to associate with the Lord doesn't go well with a person that has the mentality of exploiting. And so this lesson, as we're saying, that Prabhupada is helping us to understand, is since time immemorial, Krishna comes in order to teach us, to show us that there always going to be this mood of exploitation. That's why he says devotees to be in association with his devotees. And so in killing the demons, we learn from so many of the devotees that study demoniac activities, that demoniac activities is based on a consciousness, and each demon represents the condition living entity has. And so Krishna comes in order to change, to transform that consciousness. And he comes in a mood of sporting with these demons, killing them, liberating them. Has so many amazing, beautiful activities with the demons. However, on a meta-narrative understanding of this, there is the consciousness, the demoniac consciousness, that is there in conditioned souls. And so Krishna advents for these reasons. He comes to help us. In that verse, Yada Yada Dharmasya, Krishna comes into this world simply to awaken our consciousness. And here we are, sitting in a Zoom class in maybe different cities on this planet Earth, coming together to hear this amazing conversation between Jad Bharat and Maharaj Raghugana, to hear what the lessons are about the consciousness of exploitation or the consciousness of compassion and care. This is basically what the Srila Prabhupada is helping us to understand in this text. As we know, Srila Prabhupada's mood that he has given to all of us in coming to America, this mood is the mood of, as a devotee, trying to develop, to help us to try to develop this mood of param dukkha dukkha, right? Param dukkha dukkha dukhi, param dukkha dukhi. So this is the mood of a devotee, that the devotees are very unhappy when they see others unhappy. That's the mood of compassion. That's the mood of care. That's the mood of Srila Prabhupada. That was his example. Teach us how to be caring with, ourselves personally, to be caring with other people, to be caring with all of humanity, to be caring with all living entities, actually, not just people in human bodies, but all living entities. This was his mood, and this is his mood. This is still his mood. And devotees are, they're charged to carry this mood, to carry on this mood. And so when a devotee sees exploitation, they become alarmed, they become concerned, they become sometimes disturbed, even though we understand exploitation is a part of this conditioned material world. However, when we see it in our communities, in our devotee communities, then that's a cause, for concern, because that's not the mood of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's mood is, how to be compassionate, how to be caring, how to be loving. There's so many wonderful examples of Srila Prabhupada to exemplify this mood. And every devotee here can share at least one pastime of Srila Prabhupada where he exemplified this mood of caring. Malati Prabhu, she, some years ago, I remember being at a retreat, and I was speaking with her and Rukmini, and they were sharing about, at that point in time, that ladies' voices weren't heard so much in our institution, because that was just the time that people were going through in our institution. And so they were concerned. They were very concerned about that. And they wanted to bring an awareness to people of the loving relationships that Srila Prabhupada daughters had with Srila Prabhupada. And so they were kind of just sharing how to go about doing this. What do we do? And I happened to be like a fly in that conversation. And one of the things that was decided in our conversation is to interview as many ladies as possible that had association with Srila Prabhupada. And then to share those conversations that they had, those instructions, those activities that they shared with Srila Prabhupada, or the activities Srila Prabhupada shared with them, to put that in print. And so a book came from that conversation. And the book is called A Bond of Love. And in that book, there are unlimited, unlimited is a stretch, but there are many, many discussions or many conversations that the ladies have shared about different exchanges with Srila Prabhupada. And when we hear these kinds of exchanges, all we hear is love, care, concerns for each person. Just so he's this father and spiritual master that is a representative of God, being an example of a representative of God. And so that is a part of the Vedic, that's a part of the culture of the devotees. That's what we're aspiring for, to somehow imbibe, to get that mood of Prabhupada embedded in our consciousness, to remove whatever demoniac ways of thinking that may still be there. Because when we come as devotees, as I shared the last time I did the class, we bring with us some of those material conditioning of exploitation, of having that mood of exploitation, like Rahugana. This mood of exploitation is just very prominent. And so when we come into the atmosphere of bhakti, or we come into the atmosphere of engaging in devotional service, or the atmosphere of chanting the Lord's holy names, sometimes we have still some of that consciousness of exploitation. Many cases, most cases, we come with those consciousness. However, as we engage in the process of bhakti, then that consciousness becomes minimized. And by serving the spiritual master helps us to develop this mood of param dukha dukhi, which is the mood of loving compassion, which is the mood of seeing every living entity as a part and parcel of the Lord. This mood requires having this understanding that we are simply servants. We're servants of the servant of the servant of the servant. And it's not, it's not like it's so easy to have this consciousness all the time that I'm a servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. And certainly because of the previous conditioning, the mentality of exploitation may still come at times, and it comes even in the community of devotees. However, by our associations with each other, we assist each other, we help each other, we remind each other, no, we're servants. I read somewhere, I think it's Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was sharing that these titled Das and Dasi, because this verse, it reflects this mood of Rahugana, is, teaching us about this mood of exploitation. So this mood of exploitation is seeing seeing another person as a resource, my resource. And I remember being once in a it was like a seminar workshop, it was a seminar, I think. And there was a devotee making a presentation, and it was about caring for devotees. And I remember him saying, devotees are resources, and Srila Prabhupada definitely gave us that sutra, that utility is the principle. And sometimes we have that mood, well, the devotees are resources, utility is the principle. So we simply utilize them for whatever it is that is needed at the time. However, this consciousness kind of can sometimes be lurking in that conditioned consciousness of exploitation. And that conditioned consciousness of exploitation, although we may say, a lot of times we say, the results, the results is for Krishna. It's all for Krishna. And yes, however, there's different degrees of how we may really understand that in our devotee community. So that's an awareness with ourselves to know, okay, this is for Krishna, but how much of it am I really conscious? Am I really aware? Am I really connected with myself enough to know that I'm definitely doing this for Krishna and not by some of my own conditioned exploitative mentality? So back to that past time of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, she was sharing that Das and Dasi, those last part of our titles, Das and Dasi, actually means slave, that we are slaves to our spiritual teachers, and ultimately we're Krishna's slaves, ultimately. Now, this understanding for most people is very difficult, because when we think of slaves, we think of exploitation. We think somebody's going to exploit us, like Maharaj Rahugana. He's exploiting these citizens. He saw them as slaves. And that's definitely a material conditioning. And that conditioning is quite destructive. And that conditioning is very prominent in this world, as you all know. Is more prominent in certain cultures than it is in others in our world, this materialistic exploitive culture. However, when we study cultures, when we study material cultures, we can understand some of that mentality and where it comes from, and how citizens, many citizens, they, in those countries where this mentality is prominent, where the mentality of the slave consciousness, you belong to me, I own you, therefore I can set parameters on how you exist in life. This is quite prominent in some cultures, even today, very, very much. And in some ways, in a very subtle way, it's very prominent in America. As we all know, this is not news to any of us, this mood of exploiting people, coming from a background of slave mentality, this mentality of being a slave, which means you're lesser than the other person. However, Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, Dasa and Dasi means that we're slaves. It means that we're slaves to Krishna. So now this is a whole different mentality. We're slaves on bhakti. So to make that transformation is the challenge that each and every person have. To make the transformation of a slave, that's a person that exploits someone in the mood of thinking they're my slave, or in the mood of, I'm a servant, you're a servant, we're all servants. We're servants, servant. Prabhupada said that one time. We're servant, 1,000 times servant. To have that consciousness is requires a deep absorption in the path of bhakti, very deep absorption. It's not so easy. And this text shows us, this king, of course, is a Kshatriya. Somebody could say, well, as a Kshatriya, he's allowed to have servants. He's allowed to, have people that serve him. However, Prabhupada says the real meaning of king is to have these persons is to see himself as a servant to these people. And in that way, that cultivate this mood of dependence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, dependence on the Lord. When that's not there, then there is definitely a problem. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he used to call his disciples Prabhus, because Bhaktisiddhanta, he thought of himself as a servant to his disciples. The Prabhupada tells us stories about Bhaktisiddhanta and how he treated his disciples. What was his mood? This mood of understanding that he was a servant. So this path of bhakti is very beautiful, very wonderful, very glorious. At the same time, it can be a little dangerous in the sense that if someone is not transforming their consciousness from this mood of being an exploiter, having this mood of exploitation, then simply they will be exploiting others, in wherever they may be. And certainly we have many stories of exploitation in some of our different communities. So this role, this mood of practicing bhakti as a leader is very risky, can be very risky. And it applies to everyone, not saying this to any specific persons. It's everyone. Every one of us has to be so conscious of the risk of being a leader in this path of bhakti, because we have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility to change that mentality of being exploitive. And that mentality can only be changed by the grace and the mercy of the spiritual guides, the spiritual teachers. And that includes those that are in leadership position. They've taken that role to guide the people that have come to them, to guide them, not to exploit them. Here in this verse, it says that Jai Bharat was he was bringing awareness to Maharaj Rahugana in a very straightforward way, that you're exploiting because you're not paying people. In our institution, in our communities, there's two schools of thought about that, whether to pay people or not. I was brought up being nurtured as a devotee from my guide. I was trained not to get payment, not to receive payment, in terms of monetary payment. However, it doesn't mean that there cannot be another school of thought that can also be help a person to fulfill how they serve, how they engage in devotional service by getting paid. The foundational understanding is whether a person is paid or not paid, is that they understand that they're doing it for Krishna. And at the end of the day, whether they get paid or not paid, it doesn't matter, because perhaps some people need to be paid for it. It needs to be cared for, and or extended needs that they may have. Both of those schools of thought can be valuable in our devotee community. The guide has to help one to understand, to not become so attached to the payment, or not to the non-payment. Sometimes somebody can become very disturbed, or they can become very resentful that they don't get paid. So either way, the point that's being made here is to not have that exploitive mentality. And that's for each individual person to examine within themselves, whether they're getting paid or not. Yeah, so in order to have this mentality of not being exploitive, a person has to become non-envious. A person has to really understand envy and has to move away from becoming envy. And this is one of the most disastrous kind of mentality to have. And when a person is practicing bhakti, to be envious of another person for whatever, however it might manifest. So we're very attentive very attentive when we see envy within ourselves. And we try to take responsibility because we hear this pastime, which teaches us that this mood of exploitation is developed by a person having this envy. And so we want to learn how to become non-envious. And how do we learn how to become non-envious? Well, Prabhupada certainly gives us, all the keys of how to do that. Serving the devotees, of course, is one of those keys. And to recognize the root of our envy, which is ultimately being envious of Krishna. Ultimately, we chose to be in this material world. And so when we can understand those things, when we have those awareness, the awareness of where the envy root comes from, and then we transform that consciousness by remembering we're servants and having that mood of serving to devotees, in a mood of not being exploitive, then we get the grace, we get the mercy, we get so much love and affection from everyone around us. So, yeah, then Prabhupada goes into talking about how the Supreme Krishna is the Lord Vishnu. Krishna is in charge of everything. Everything belongs to Krishna, right? And so this envy comes from sometimes we not having this awareness, this memory, this understanding that, Krishna is the maintainer. He is the seed-giving Father. Krishna is everything. So we need to be reminded every day, every single day. This morning when I got on the class, Tarka shared, we were speaking a little bit. He said, "How are you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just grateful. I'm really grateful because, firstly, I woke up this morning, just, okay, what can I do today, Krishna? How can I serve you? What can I do?" And to keep that mentality, it's not easy. We got to be reminded all the time. So it's nice when we sincerely ask devotees from the bottom of our hearts, "How are you? How are you?" Because each day might bring a different consciousness. Each day we may be charged with some of those different, anarthas that might be lying deep within our hearts, and we may need to face them. And so we need guidance, we need help, we need support. And that's only within our communities. That's what we have. That's only thing we have is each other. And so the leaders has to be very careful. It's a very delicate service to be able to care for others. When we were working on devotee care, we came up with I think 20 areas where devotees are not cared for in our different communities. And not necessarily because there's this exploitive mentality why they're not cared for. Just sometimes it's just some kind of neglect, some kind of not being aware, not understanding. So then we had to start bringing that awareness of how important it is to care for each other and to keep bringing Srila Prabhupada back in the picture of care, of how Srila Prabhupada loved and cared for his devotees. And so, of course, we know that the most important way that we can care for each other in this, as Prabhupada talked about, this disastrous age in one sense of Kali Yuga, even though Kali Yuga for the materialists is very, it's difficult because most people are going to be recycled. But for devotees, it's a really beautiful time because we get an opportunity to share. We get an opportunity to learn. We get from the scriptures. We get an opportunity to learn from each other. We get an opportunity to learn from the spiritual teacher, from the leaders that are moving away from that mood of exploitation. We get an opportunity to engage in devotional service. We get an opportunity to chant. So Prabhupada tells us, he says, there's a verse in, I believe it's in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it says, "My dear king, although Kali Yuga is full of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one becomes free from material bondage and can be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. So chanting is the key, right? Serving the devotees. However, at the same time, we need to be exploring and examining and looking at those demoniac qualities that we may still have. We may want to look at that exploitive mentality that we bring into our environments from the different cultures the material cultures that we have, been a part of, that we took birth in, so that we can become exemplary. We need to become very aware of how that culture of exploitation exists within me. How is it existing within me? Because I'm not absolutely free from that culture of exploitation. If I was, I would always be loving and caring with everyone. And so this is the mood of this verse. So don't give up chanting, no matter what, the Maha Mantra, no matter what is going on. That's our lifeline. Even if there's exploitation in our communities, we don't give up chanting. There's always going to be some difficulty, some external difficulty. No matter what it is, don't give up chanting. Always, Prabhupada says, under every circumstance, no matter what it is, just keep chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This is going to protect us from the dangers of being influenced by Krishna's external energy, which comes in the form of exploitation in this material world. So I close here with Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much, and keep looking inside. Hare Krishna. So if there's any reflections, any comments, yeah, Dasha Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dasha Prem. Okay, I'm not hearing. I see a few hands, but I'm not hearing anything. Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, Mataji.
Good morning, my dear Leela Kishori. Haribo.
I'm so happy to see you here again. What a wonderful class. You're hearing my grandkids in the background. So they're very chatty this morning.
But glories of being a grandma. That's a blessing.
It is. But I'm right now currently reading the 11th canto, 11th chapter, and in the verses 29 to 32 about the 28 qualities of a saintly person. And you talked about them so much this morning. And one of the things I thought about was that it even says that, a saintly person doesn't even agitate others and criticize them unnecessarily. And that is a form of exploiting someone's emotions, to criticize them or to browbeat them, to speak unkindly even. And what you said about not taking joy in someone else's suffering, making sure not to cause suffering to someone else. And one of the things it says is that even by thinking about such a saintly person, you can start to be relieved of like those actions. And I think that a lot of times I will do that now, like, I'll be in one of those situations that gives me challenges. So dealing with like a customer service person who I assume is not really doing their job well, it's like, I don't know what their day is like or what's going on in their life, but I will think about how quietly Radhanath Maharaj speaks, or how Devamrita Swami will just laugh sometimes and just go, Krishna, Krishna, and I'm like, and I'll say Krishna, and just like smile at the person and realize that I don't want to be part of the problem. Like if they're having a tough enough time, I don't want to add to that, and that sometimes that's as good as it's going to be for me, but that's something that's not trying not to exploit even how bewildered or upset they may be in that moment, So just thinking, even sometimes I think of you and your wisdom and how you'll just cut right to this, you just think like right to the heart of the matter a lot of times. So even in dealing with my own thoughts, I'm like, what is this really about, Leela Kishori? Like, what? This is not about what you're thinking you're upset about. What is this really about? And just taking that breath, that pause, that heartbeat, can make such a difference in how I show up in the world. And then I'm wearing these neck beads, I'm wearing this, I may be the only person that's giving someone a real living example of what bhakti is supposed to be like. And sometimes I think that's even why we have, not just to show that we're the servants, but externally to remind us with our neck beads, with our tilak, you need to be a representative of your Guru Maharaj, of Krishna, of bhakti. And you're showing that by what you're wearing. So live it. So thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank
Haribol.
you. Thank you for your realizations, and thank you for reading. That's my favorite realizations come from the 11th and 12th cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes I can get so much like, So thank you. Yes, Leela Kishore. It's all about our examples, all about, how we're going within ourselves and being honest with ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves. And as you said, emotional concerns, emotional abuse, emotional neglect it's really not so nice because it affects the subtle body, and so that kind of abuse can carry a person to the next, even in the next life. So we need to be conscious. Thank you so much. And Dasha Prema Prabhu, I saw that you had your hand up. Okay, I don't think that's happening. Lauren, thank you very much for being here. Dasha, how do we also get things done? How do we get things done? How do we get things done? Jed Bharat was getting so much done just by, sometimes we think getting things done means we gotta, it's physical. And that's important. That's key. That's key. When we have young bodies, we need to do physical things. I think when we realize that Krishna is the one that's getting things done, when we realize that we're simply instruments being used and we're simply servants of, what ultimately is going on by Krishna, ultimately. Krishna is giving us the health to try to do something physically. Krishna is giving us the mind and intelligence to develop the care of others. And Krishna is giving us the ability to accept the instructions of Guru. So ultimately, if we can keep that mood that everything is being designed and organized by the Supreme Lord, and if I can simply be a servant with whatever it is that I'm able to do, because certainly when you have a young body, you can do a lot physically, may not be able to do it when the body gets a little older. So we want to try to do whatever we can, yes, as much as we possibly can. However, we don't want to forget. We never want to forget, because otherwise, where that ability is coming from. Otherwise, we think we're the doer, and then we start expecting results. And when we think that by the results, that's what makes me a person to be accepted or appreciated, or now I belong because I can share results. And that's what Jad Bharat is trying to help Maharaj Rahugana. He says, your behavior is he used some harsh words here. He says that your behavior is, and certainly this king is doing a lot. He says your behavior is what? Ludicrous. You're such a fool. You're not even, you can't be accepted or understood by learned persons because of that behavior you have. It's not that the king wasn't doing stuff. He's doing a lot. He's a king. So the king, though, had that mood of bragging, right? That's what it says in the Sanskrit. Vigatadhamanaha. He was a bragger. He thought he was doing it. He thought, I'm the protector. I can do this. Why not? I mean, I can exploit them. He wasn't even aware that he was exploiting them. That's how deep his condition was. He wasn't even aware. He just thought that's normal. So sometimes we think it's normal to be in the mood of getting results. And then we camouflage that by saying, well, I'm doing it for Krishna. And yes, maybe we are, but sometimes, most of the time, it's mixed. It's very mixed. So we always want to be conscious of that. You know, it's a personal thing, really. So it's not a contradiction. No, it's an and. I am a servant, and being a servant of Krishna, I get an opportunity to do some services, which is services that, you know, perhaps in how my perspective is getting things done. But ultimately, you know, Krishna can make us sick at any point in time. Krishna can, I mean, material energy can make us sick. I mean, our bodies can fall apart at any moment. And then what is that about getting things done? What's that? Getting things done. So, yeah, it's an individual thing. Individual thing in a sense that it's the responsibility is on us to see. When I make that statement, am I thinking I'm getting it done? Am I remembering, well, Krishna, thank you for giving me the health, the strength to be able to try to do some things to bring other people here and, you know, to facilitate, you know, a community of service. What is my consciousness about it? That's what we always got to be checking in with ourselves, always. Because we come from an exploitive culture, all of us. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to see you, missing you. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon in our group. We're gonna, I guess that's in a few weeks. So yeah, that's exciting. If there are no more questions, no more comments, yay, I'm dying for the Sangha too. I'm dying for your association. So much looking forward for your association. Haribol. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, we're in it together to love and serve and care for each other. As with our focus on Krishna and, you know, just trying to understand the mood of Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual masters. That's our only hope. Thank you. Okay, my dear friends, since there's nothing else, I usually have a class at 8:30. So I'm going to have to take leave. And I'm so very grateful that all of you are here. Thankful. Tarka Prabhu, Leela Kashiri, just Jashina. Oh, yeah, from Atlanta. So nice. Priya Manjari. I'm not sure if this is Priya Manjari here in Nagari or this is Priya Manjari from somewhere else. Lauren Prameshwari, Sarvat Mantivya, Hare Krishna. Thank you for your kind support. Thank you very much. Haribo. Okay, can I end? Okay.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.